Hello everyone, my name is Siam Ben Salah and I'm a PhD candidate at Yonsei University. Today I'll be discussing Molka, a horror novel by Monika Kim published in April 2026. My presentation, titled Sexposure and the Digital Libidinal Economy of the Flesh in Molka, examines the extraction, digitalization, and circulation of the female body, as well as the reconfiguration of biopatriarchal power in contemporary South Korea. Through this analysis, I explore how the novel engages with digital sexual violence, technological voyeurism, and the consumption and circulation of what I theorize as digital flesh. Over the past 2 decades, South Korea has emerged as one of the world's most technologically advanced and digitally connected societies, often serving as a model of digital modernity. Yet, the rapid expansion of digital technologies has also facilitated new forms of gendered violence that frequently outpass legal and institutional responses. From hidden camera recordings and non-consensual image distribution to online sexual exploitation and AI-generated deepfakes, digital sex crimes have become an increasingly visible feature of South Korea's technological landscape. It is within this context that Monika Kim situates her second horror novel, Molka, an exploration of technological voyeurism, surveillance, and image-based sexual violence. The novel takes its title from the term Molka, derived from mole camera, meaning hidden camera and referring to the covert recordings of individuals without their knowledge or consent. Throughout the 2010s, the proliferation of spy cam crimes, the circulation of non-consensual sexual content on platforms such as Soronet, the Burning Sun scandal in 2019, the Nth Rooms case uncovered in 2020, revealed how digital technologies had become central to new forms of sexual exploitation. And more recently, the rise of AI-generated deepfake pornography has shown that technology-facilitated sexual violence continues to evolve, creating new challenges for existing legal, social, and institutional responses. Drawing on this broader social context, Molka follows Dae, an office worker who spends much of her free time with her boyfriend Yuk-jun, the heir of a multi-million-dollar fortune. Everything starts falling apart, however, when Yuk-jun becomes embroiled in a scandal after a group chat is leaked exposing how he and his friends share non-consensual recordings of their sexual encounters. Among the videos circulated are recordings of Dae herself, turning her intimate life into an object of public exposure and digital consumption. Running alongside Dae's story is that of her coworker, Jun-young, who develops an obsessive fixation on her. He begins to feed his fantasies by secretly filming women with Molka hidden in his workplace restroom, but his voyeuristic impulses gradually intensify as filming women in secret no longer satisfies him. He seeks not only access to Dae's private life, but also a place within it, stalking her and manipulating situations, trying to draw closer to her. So through these intertwined narratives, Molka examines the destructive effects of technological voyeurism, non-consensual exposure, and digital surveillance, while foregrounding the psychological and social consequences of image-based sexual violence in women's everyday lives. Through Kim's techno-horror fiction Molka, this presentation examines the rise of technology-facilitated sexual violence in South Korea, approaching the country not as an exceptional site of digital violence, but as a critical case study through which broader transformations of gendered power under digital modernity can be understood. Thus, this study asks how the novel illuminates a mutation of biopatriarchal power whereby the female body is transformed into a consumable and circulatory form of libidinal flesh through systems of sexposure, extraction, and dissemination. The first part examines how technological infrastructures and practices of exposure transform fragmented bodily images into disembodied and reproducible forms of digital flesh. The second situates technology-facilitated sexual violence within a sociopolitical and institutional architecture of digital biopatriarchy, highlighting the mutually reinforcing relationship between gendered power and technological system. And this presentation is drawn from a larger project that also explores techno-feminist forms of resistance. And in this third big part, I ask whether bodily autonomy and agency can still be reclaimed once embodiment has been reconfigured by regimes of visibility, extraction, and consumption. And I also examine the role of fiction in giving voice to this contemporary and evolving social issue. This research thus contributes to emerging scholarship of technology-facilitated sexual violence and the reconfiguration of gendered power under digital modernity, and departing from predominantly legal, sociological, and criminological approaches to Molka and digital sex crimes in general, it advances a literary critical framework for examining how fiction articulates the psychological, corporeal, and ontological transformations produced by digital exposure. So the novel Molka stages technology-facilitated sexual violence as a pervasive social logic operating across multiple scales and contexts. Throughout the novel, women's bodies are repeatedly rendered visible and available through digital mediation that function beyond their knowledge or consent. To articulate this multi-scalar regime of voyeurism, Kim structures the narrative around two configurations of Molka. The first one takes the form of a private scopophilic Molka hidden by Junyoung, Dahe's co-worker, in the company restroom. By storing recordings for repeated viewing, he creates a personal archive that sustains his voyeuristic jouissance. The second emerges as a networked form of sexual Molka through Yukjun, so Dahe's boyfriend, who drugs women, records their rape, and circulates the footage within male digital networks. So by juxtaposing this configuration, the novel demonstrates that technology-facilitated sexual violence cannot be reduced to the act of recording alone. Rather, it operates as a broader libidinal economy and infrastructure of visibility in which women's bodies are transformed into visual commodities whose value is produced through exposure, reproducibility, and circulation. The novel opens directly through Junyoung's focalization, establishing surveillance as a mode of narration. The opening scene is presented through the hidden camera he has installed in the women's bathroom, positioning the reader as an unwilling participant in an act of voyeurism even before the violence of the situation is fully disclosed. So by collapsing narrative focalization into the perspective of the surveillance device, the novel makes technological mediation the very condition of perception from its opening pages. Looking is therefore never innocent. From the outset, vision is structured by asymmetries of power, consent, and access. The bathroom emerges as a site of asymmetrical visibility, where female intimacy is subjected to the male gaze through digital surveillance. As one of the few spaces conventionally associated with complete bodily privacy, the bathroom becomes a particularly revealing site of violation. Its surveillance reflects what Donna Haraway identifies as the collapse of the public and private distinction under contemporary technoscientific condition. Although materially enclosed, the bathroom is rendered digitally permeable, exposing the fragility of privacy itself. As Haewon Jung observes in her book Flowers of Fire, another amazing book on digital, sexual, and gendered violence in South Korea, the prevalence of bathroom Molka suggests that voyeuristic pleasure derives not only from the sexual gratification, but also from humiliation. The violence, therefore, lies not simply in the production of illicit images, but in the appropriation of the authority to determine when, how, and for whom the female body becomes visible. By adopting the hidden camera as its initial focalizing perspective, the novel places the reader in the position of the voyeur, implicating them in the regime of non-consensual spectatorship structured by the asymmetry between seeing and being seen. Within this visual regime, Michel's body is reduced to a series of eroticized surfaces. I quote, a lacy black thong, glossy thighs, and the airless triangle of her sex, etc. So through the Molka gaze, her embodied presence is fragmented and reconstituted as what I term digital flesh, a corporeality detached from lived experience and transformed into reproducible visual data. Here, extraction, fragmentation, manipulation, and circulation sever the body image from the subject, rendering it available for storage, replay, and dissemination across digital networks. This process extends the logic of cinematic scopophilia described by Laura Mulvey, in which she describes the female body, that in contemporary cinema, the female body is fragmented into objects of masculine visual pleasure. Yet, whereas cinema fragments a performed body image, Molka extracts fragments moments of everyday embodiment without the subject knowledge or consent. Thus, fragmentation shifts from an aesthetic strategy to a technological operation of surveillance. Once digitized, the body image acquires a degree of autonomy from the embodied subject, becoming a durable object of manipulation and circulation. Thus, digital flesh names the form of corporeality assumed when lived embodiment is converted into reproducible visual data. Once extracted from lived embodiment, digital flesh enters a circuit of storage, replay, and circulation that sustain renewed libidinal investment. Desire is directed not simply toward Michelle herself, but toward the technological arrangements that render her body perpetually retrievable. So here I'm going to quote Jean-François Lyotard, who argues that libidinal intensities are not inherently attached to particular bodies or objects, but they may become invested in any element of a larger assemblage. So in Molka, and in this passage especially, voyeuristic desire extend beyond the captured body, but to the apparatus that makes the image recordable, storable, and replayable. Jun Young's concern with maintaining the camera in a perfect position and ensuring an uninterrupted recording reflects this investment. The object of desire is no longer the body alone, but the technological conditions that guarantee its recording. Unlike Jun Young, whose voyeurism is immediately coded as transgressive, Yukjun initially appears through Dahe's perspective as the embodiment of masculine desirability. As the heir of a powerful conglomerate and a prominent public figure, he possesses considerable economic and symbolic authority. Dahe therefore interprets his increasingly controlling behavior as care. But this perspective collapses when, after the couple spend the night together at a hotel, Hyuk-jun claims that they have been caught by a Molka. Dahe soon discovers that he is not a victim, but a perpetrator. He secretly recorded their sexual encounter and shared the footage in a group chat with his friends. So through this leaked Kakao Talk chat, Kim explicitly situates Molka within a broader history of digital sex crimes in South Korea, particularly the Burning Sun scandal in 2019, in which celebrities and businessmen circulated non-consensual sexual recordings while facilitating sexual exploitation. So the novel reproduces key discursive features of the leaked chat logs. Sexual violence appears as collective and networked practice. Chemical incapacitation is normalized through euphemistic language, and women are reduced to consumable objects through a vocabulary of appetite and exchange. Yet, Molka does more than reproduce the archive of the scandal. While the leaked conversation exposed the language of the perpetrators, they reveal little about the experience of those targeted by this violence. By reworking this material through Dahi's perspective, Kim foregrounds the psychological, affective, and corporeal consequences of these digital sexual violence. In doing so, the novel supplements the archive while raising a central question: can victims be made visible without reproducing the very structure of exposure that enabled their objectification? So this is what we're going to focus on in a second part: visibility, interpretation, and socio-political infrastructure that enables to read this visibility. So while the forms of Molka depicted in the novel differ in scale and modality, Molka consistently refuses to represent its perpetrator as exceptional individuals. Instead, their actions are situated within broader patriarchal order that normalizes and reproduces digital sexual violence. So the novel traces Junyoung's voyeurism to childhood, long before the introduction of digital technologies. As a boy, he secretly watches his neighbor until it became a daily ritual. So I quote, "Soon he was at her window every single morning." More importantly, it is his father's response that normalizes this behavior. When the neighbor insists that she has been violated, he dismisses her claim, saying, I quote, "Violated you? Don't be ridiculous. Did he break into your room, get physical with you? Then I don't see the problem." So by reducing violence to physical intrusion, he renders voyeurism conceptually invisible. This lesson is reinforced when he reassures his son that, I quote, "Boys will be boys, and that women are inherently weak. It's a man's job to lead." So Molka suggests that digital technologies do not create voyeuristic violence, but intensify pre-existing patriarchal dispositions, extending them through practices of recording, archiving, and circulation. And as Judy Workman, in her research on techno-feminism, argues, gender and technoscience are mutually constitutive. So surveillance technologies become a mean through which patriarchal modes of looking are amplified and reproduced. Yet, the novel complicates such deterministic reading by showing that voyeuristic violence is reinforced not only by the family, but also through broader institutional structures. Indeed, the normalization of voyeuristic violence does not remain confined to the domestic sphere, but extend into the institutions ostensibly responsible for protecting victims. So now we're going to focus on police officers, but I personally think that attributing such violence primarily to family background and institutional figure may appear somehow reductive and risk obscuring questions of individual accountability. But we can see that the author's intention seems less to portray this structure as the origin of misogyny than to reveal how they sustain, normalize, and perpetuate it. So after the police officer discovered the bathroom recordings on Junyoung's phone, he initially fears legal consequences and asks whether he will be arrested. Rather than treating the video as evidence of a serious violation, the officers laugh and dismiss Junyoung's concern, saying, "It's just a few videos. And it's not like you hurt anybody." So echoing the logic previously articulated by Junyoung's father, the remark reduces violence to physical injury and renders surveillance conceptually unintelligible as harm. So, in Bourdieu's term, this statement exercises I quote, "power of constituting the given through utterances." So, in other words, speaking from position of authority, both the father and the police define the limits of what can be recognized as violence or not. So the hidden camera thus appeared not as an isolated tool of voyeurism, but as a part of a wider biopatriarchal infrastructure that reproduces patriarchal power through technological, institutional, and social networks. So, having examined the production of visual evidence, the novel shifts to the struggle over its interpretation. So, to briefly spoil the ending, Dahi's boyfriend emerges largely unscathed from the Molka scandal. The controversy is quickly eclipsed by his transfer to the United States for corporate training, and after his engagement to the daughter of another powerful family, recasting him as a promising businessman and devoted future husband. In response, Dahi's invites him to her apartment, castrates him, and kills him. Shortly afterward, Junyoung's break into her apartment and steal her underwear. When Dahes confront him, she threatens to kill him before the police arrive. The officers ultimately shoot and kill Dahe, perceiving her as a dangerous and unstable woman. So, although Junyoung is found in possession of Dahe's stolen underwear and illicit recordings of her in his phone, these material traces fail to determine the public narrative. Instead, he successfully presents himself as the victim, while a journalist hails him as, I quote, a hero to us all. So Molka thus demonstrates how patriarchal and institutional discourses can override material evidence, shaping not only what is seen, but also how it is interpreted. So the novel returned to one of the central insights. Digital sexual violence is sustained not through the circulation of images, but also through patriarchal control over their interpretation. As Myung-won and Min-young Kim suggest in their article, recognition and grievability are socially regulated. So here it really fits Dahe's narrative because Dahe's death becomes a struggle over recognition. Rather than being mourned as a victim of technologically facilitated sexual violence, she is recast through media discourse as a deviant figure whose death appears morally and intelligible rather than socially grievable. So the ending extends the logic of sexposure from image to narrative. Just as Dahe's body is transformed into digital flesh, her experience is detached from her testimony and repackaged as a consumable story. So as Junyoung is recast as a heroic survivor, Dahe loses authority over the meaning of her own experience. Molka thus suggests that technology facilitated sexual violence involves not only the production of illicit images, but also the struggle over the narratives through which victims become publicly legible. This struggle is finally reflected in the novel's unequal distribution of visibility. Before her retaliation, the violence inflicted upon Dahe, hidden camera recording, voyeuristic spectatorship, thefts, rape after she was drugged, and repeated invasion of her privacy fails to generate meaningful public recognition. However, her retaliatory violence becomes immediately hypervisible. Yet, public fascination centers less on Yoongjun's death than on the symbolic castration. Not only symbolic, like real castration he went through. So the chronology is revealing death function almost as an afterthought, while castration becomes the event that organizes Dahe's narrative. So as Barbara Creed argues, the monstrous feminine is intimately bound to anxiety surrounding sexual difference and castration. Dahes thus become monstrous not because she kills him, but because she symbolically attacked the phallic order. Whereas homicide remain legible as criminal violence, castration threatens the very structures of patriarchal authority that have enabled the appropriation and circulation of women's body throughout the novel. So the media reconstruction of Dahes reinforces this threat by transforming her into an object of horror. Junyoung's depict her as, I quote, sick in the head, while fabricated allegations of cannibalism recast her as the monstrous feminine. In doing so, media discourse redirects attention away from the structural condition that produced her retaliation and relocates violence within Dahes herself. So monstrosities thus function as a mechanism of depoliticization, through which female resistance is absorbed while the structures of technology-facilitated sexual violence remain intact. So this final movement completes the novel economy of sex exposure. Throughout the narrative, Dahes is repeatedly appropriated as an object of patriarchal consumption. But the form of that consumption continually changes. She is first consumed as a digital flesh through the circulation of illicit images. Once she refuses the position of consumable victim, she is immediately reconstituted as a monstrous feminine through the circulation of sensational narratives. So the object of patriarchal consumption, therefore, shifts from body to story. Yet the apparatus that organizes this consumption remained unchanged. Exposure ultimately names not only the technological extraction of women's body into digital images, but the broader patriarchal economy through which female embodiment, memory, and even resistance are successively reorganized into consumable forms. So the patriarchal gaze survives the body itself, continually producing new objects of consumption whenever women attempt to escape the old ones. So that was my presentation for today. Thank you for listening. And if you want to hear more about that, you can find my paper, my extended paper. Thank you.